Hi, my name is Jenna Serrato, and I did my action research project on English language learners and guided reading. And this is for December 9th, 2016. The main purpose of my action research study is to increase the reading comprehension and writing about reading using daily ELL guided reading groups. And I'm researching and studying to see if the English language learners in my fourth grade classroom will be affected by a daily guided reading lesson or another intervention. I chose this topic for many different reasons, but I mainly chose it because this is currently my first year having the ELL cluster or teaching ELL students. And so I just really wanted to learn and figure out a better way for them to be more successful in fourth grade with their reading and writing and just literacy as a whole. I currently have 5 students out of my 28 total fourth graders who receive English language learning language services. And all 5 of my students are reading and writing below grade level currently. And I'm currently teaching at a Title I school, which means we have mainly free and reduced lunch students. So student 1, he moved to the United States last year from China, and he didn't know any English when he came over. His mom still currently doesn't know any English, and his dad speaks limited amount. So we have to use a translator to communicate with through emails or phone calls or even during conferences. And he is currently reading and writing below grade level. Student number 2 is the only female ELL student that I have in my classroom this year. She has attended our school since kindergarten, and she's received EL services since kindergarten as well. Her parents are from Nigeria, and her dad actually just moved back. So she is currently just living with her mom and her sister. And she is currently reading, writing, and spelling below grade level. Student 3, he is an only child. His father is from Italy and his mom is from South America. He is living with his mom, his dad, and his grandma, and so they mostly speak Spanish at home. And he is reading below grade level, or he is below grade level for writing and spelling. He didn't come in that low for reading. He was just one level below our grade level, so it's not as big of a concern as his writing and spelling. Student 4, he receives EL services and also special education services. He receives special education services for math and literacy. His whole family is very involved with church. They go every day, and so it's very hard for them to be super involved with school. There isn't a lot of parent involvement with school. Both of his parents are from South America, but they don't speak Spanish at home. They actually all speak English. And he is below grade level for reading, writing, and spelling. Student 5, his parents are both from South America as well. He lives with his mom, his aunt, and his uncle. He is currently being tested for special ed in writing and reading because that's where he is mainly below grade level in. So for my literature review, I mainly focused on 3 main areas. I focused on guided reading in the classroom, fluency and comprehension, and then English language learners as a whole based on their literacy. So for guided reading in the classroom, Fontes and Pinnell quoted saying that guided reading is an instructional setting that enables you to work with a small group of students to help them learn effective strategies for processing text with understanding. I also learned that it basically is just meeting with a small group of students for 20 to 30 minutes daily. There are a lot of different ways that I learned that you can differentiate your guided reading groups. It doesn't have to just be based on their ability, which I always thought. It could also be based on their interests. So if you have a group of kids that are really interested in learning about the ocean, maybe you can pull them as a guided reading group so they can have really rich conversations. And guided reading helps the teacher specifically meet the needs of every single learner. The first thing that teachers do when they have their guided reading groups is they introduce the text. So they might just show the cover or talk about the table of contents. And then while the students are reading, the teacher can listen for fluency and also how the students decompose unknown words. For my fluency and comprehension section, I mainly came into this thinking that if students were not very fluent with their reading or they were super choppy as they were reading, they would have a low comprehension score. But I actually learned that this is not true, that there are studies that show that even if students are reading not as fluent or it's not as flowy, that they still are able to understand and comprehend what they're reading. And for ELL students with the fluency and comprehension piece, it's basically just like how they have their day-to-day conversations and how their fluency and how fluid it comes out when they're talking with their peers. And there are also a lot of different activities that teachers can do to help these ELL students with the fluency and comprehension piece that I learned. Some of these could be including songs or having the students act out plays, playing different games where they have to do things orally. And also doing a lot of poetry in the classroom can help these students as well. And then for the English language learners in literacy, I learned that they come from 400 different language backgrounds, which really surprised me because I guess I mainly just thought of the main ones, not 400. And then I also learned that when students have higher levels of oral language proficiency, they also tend to have higher reading levels as well. So if they are speaking orally, communicating with others, then their reading levels tend to correlate with that too. And then I kind of connected this piece with the vocabulary part of it. It's a lot of our units of study, especially in science and social studies in school, is very rich in vocabulary, and it's really hard for ELL students to understand a lot of these basic vocabulary words that some non-ELL students might have learned previously back in like kindergarten or even before school. So it's very important to front load these ELL students with different vocabulary words and introduce them to the different concepts before they are taught in class as whole group. And an example that I did is, I talk more about it later in this slideshow, but I did with one of my ELL guided reading groups, we read a book all about water when we previously did our whole science unit of study on hydrology. So they were more familiar with the topic, and so it was a little bit easier for them to understand the concept. And then I had 3 main data sources that I did for my action research. The first one is based on the Fountas and Pinnell Baseline Assessment System, the BASS assessments. And I did these 3 times throughout my research study. I did them at the beginning, so week 1, again at week 3, and then I ended it at week 6. I also collected field notes, and an example of that is a picture that I have on this slide, and it's broken up into their reading and writing. So I kind of just took notes as they were reading every single lesson, and they met with me based on what they already know for their reading and for their writing, and then what I think that they need coming up next immediately. So I could use this when planning my next lesson, and I could also use this when I was forming my groups too, based on what different kids needed. And then the last piece of data that I collected was their student data. And the main student data that I collected was their writing about reading, which I talk about in the next slide. So this is one data analysis piece that I collected, and it's the writing about reading. And writing about reading is after the students, or before, the students are about to read a text. They are to write down anything from making a connection or making a prediction, comparing different texts. They could also just give basic facts about what they learned or details of things that they learned when they were reading. And this writing about reading is a really big push that's happening in our district right now with the whole literacy piece. We're trying to match the students' writing abilities with their reading abilities. So whatever level they're reading at, they should be writing the same level. So here's 2 examples that I collected. And like I said before, we were reading a water book. So the first part that they were to write about was what they think the book is going to be about. And then we read one page, and after we read one page, we closed the book, and then they wrote a little bit more of the facts that they learned, and then we read another page, and then closed it, and then they wrote another little paragraph on the facts that they learned from that page. So it's kind of just the breaking apart the comprehension pieces is what we focused on in this lesson. So that first top one, student 2, she wrote her writing about reading in sentence form, which we have been working on, especially for her. It's really hard for her to think of a who did what sentence or a complete sentence. But looking at her writing, I can tell that she can defend her predictions based on that first paragraph. She defended what she thinks the story is going to be about. And she also has a general idea of what she can read on each page of the text. We are now currently working on just adding more detail into her writing. And then the bottom one, student 1, this is the little boy who just came to the United States from China last year. And so his confidence with his writing is not as high. His spelling is actually very, very awesome for where he is at with his literacy ability. But just the ending parts like the ED or the ING or just adding an S is where he kind of struggles. And so he wrote his writing about reading in bullet point form because he's not as confident with writing complete sentences. But moving forward, I know I need to work on his endings and also how to write a complete sentence. But he is able to recall what he read about. But it's just hard for him to put his ideas down on paper. The other part of the data analysis piece that I collected with my students was their baseline assessment system, or their BAS scores. And this is based on the Fountas and Pinnell baseline assessment system. So basically it goes all the way from level A to Z through the alphabet, and it starts with kindergarten and it goes all the way up until grade 8. And what the BAS test is the students read just a short text and they are timed so that the assessor can see their accuracy rate or how fast that they are reading, and also they can tell their fluency score. And as they are reading, the assessor has the same copy so they can figure out if they're repeating words or if they have any miscues or if they're inserting any parts, endings, or words that aren't actually in the text. And then at the end, when the students are all done reading, they have some comprehension questions that are within the text, about the text, and beyond the text. So it kind of gets them thinking deeper about what they were reading, or gets them thinking deeper about the topic that the story might be about. And then at the very end, there's also a writing about reading piece that we do in our district to score each child. So coming into 4th grade, if you look down at that table in the bottom corner, they should be at about a P when they come into 4th grade, and then they need to leave at about a level S. So we kind of have to get them through those next couple of levels. And looking up at my table that I included, I have all of my students 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going down the side, and then looking across from their first score to their second score to their third score. And when I was looking through and across their data, I noticed that a lot of my students either maintained where they were originally or they gained their reading score. Their reading score went up, which was awesome. But you can still see that even coming in, I had like my student number 3, like I said before, he kind of was right on the bubble. So he came in at a level O, so just below grade level, but I have kiddos reading at a J or an N or a K or an M. And my J student is still reading at a K in November. So I really need to continue doing an intervention with him to keep him moving up. And then my action plan that I did with my students, I met with these groups. I broke them up into 2 different groups, actually, based on their BAS score, their baseline assessment system score from Fountas and Pinnell. Just because they are all over the board, I had an O and then I also had a J, so I needed to split them up somehow just so I could meet all of their needs. So I split them up into 2 different groups and I met with them every day for 15 to 20 minutes. This is kind of like a double dip that I did because I already met previously, or I meet every day with them with my other 4th graders. So this is kind of an extra piece that I do with these groups. And when I'm meeting with these groups, I work on their accuracy with their reading, their comprehension, their writing about reading, and kind of decomposing those words that they struggle with still. And their spelling is mainly what I work on for their writing about reading. And every day in lesson, we have a different focus based on what each student and small group needs. And when I'm planning this, I use that no needs chart for their writing and their reading. And that's kind of how I plan for the next day and figure out what each student needs so I can really, really focus in on that. And then here are my references that I used. I found them all super helpful. The one that I really dug into was the Fountas and Pinnell book, just because that's one that my district really uses, and obviously those are two names that are really well known kind of in the literacy world. And then a lot of the other ELL articles and books that I read really helped me as well.